Hey folks, I'm Kevin, and I've got a little bit of a problem. I have got a really nice deck in the back that we're always drinking coffee or have Cokes and we're just kind of hanging out there, and I've got nowhere to put any of that stuff. So I can either go out and spend several $100s on a coffee table for my deck, or I can try and make it with stuff that I have already and spend about 15 bucks. So that's what I'm gonna do today. I'm gonna try to make a coffee table for 15 bucks with stuff I already have. All right, so I got a few things that are definitely helping me save money in this particular situation. I happen to have a little coffee table kind of base that I've had for a while that I didn't need. I used the top for a different project. So I've got that available. And then I had a bunch of the cedar posts that were left over. I took them to a local sawmill, and they cut them into 1.5 inch boards that I'm going to make a really nice outdoor dining table, rough cut cedar. But the leftovers on each thing were these boards here. So I'm going to use these to make a rough cut cedar table. All right, so the first step is we need to determine how we want the table to be on top of the base. So what we're going to do is we're going to set the boards on there. We're going to move them around till we find out kind of how wide, how long we want it. We're going to do those measurements, and then we'll move on from there. Using 4 boards, we will have a little bit of overhang on either side. So as far as the width, we will just even up that overhang on either side. So now what we need to determine is the length of how far off of the base on each side these boards are going to go. All right, so we know we want at least a 10-inch overhang. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure out here and kind of see where it's at. All right, so I'm going to measure over 10 inches, put a mark, and then measure the whole board to see what my length of boards are going to be going forward. So once we start doing everything, we're going to be doing 45 3/4. So each board will end up being 45 3/4. So before I cut my 45 3/4, I'm actually going to trim off one end of the board so that they will all be a freshly cut edge so that they will all even up nicely. All right, so the next job is going to be to cut them to length. All right, so I decided to still use that as a butt stop, but now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut them all at the same time. All right, so you can see how these are going to lay up. So what our next step is going to be is we're actually going to glue those boards together. Now, I just happen to have some clamps already. So if you don't have the clamps, you don't have some of these things that may be a little bit more expensive, but be creative, because you can kind of create clamps with wood and different things if you absolutely had to. All right, so between the wood glue and the screws that I'm going to use, basically that's what I'm spending my 15 bucks on. All right, so our next step is we're going to put some glue on our boards. So try to have just something where you're not going to make a mess as much as possible. When gluing the boards, it's always good to spread the glue out on the board. Also, make sure you're alternating the grain. That keeps your boards from warping as much once they're glued together. All right, so I had a relatively flat surface we were working on, but I had some rebar and some other things in the way, and I realized I couldn't get all of these boards to lay flat. So I had to come over to the concrete area, put the cardboard underneath it, lay flat, kind of put the knee on it to clamp it down. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to try to clean up this glue real good. So we left the tabletop glued up for 24 hours, so I'm going to take the brackets off now. Then what we're going to do is begin sanding. And what we want to do is leave this roughness without kind of the get a splinter kind of thing. So I've never actually sanded something to leave it somewhat rough. And it doesn't have the big gouge roughness like I would have really preferred it to have. So we'll kind of see how that works out. The boards I used were not exactly the same thickness, they were close. I'm going to use the belt sander just to kind of take a little bit of that edge off. I don't mind the variation, I just don't want it to be something that's like you set your cup on it and it kind of falls over kind of thing. So I'm just going to kind of smooth it in a little bit with the belt sander. All right, so now the next job is to secure it to the base and make sure it's solid. I want to have each board have its at least one screw, if not a couple, in each going across to keep it nice and secure, and several going down the side. The holes that are pre-existing right now here are on the cracks where the glue is, so those won't be used. So I'm going to do some additional ones. So I'm going to have to drill them, but I need to mark them first. So I'm going to mark them real quick and then drill them through. Okay. Now it's time to stain the table, and we're going to use the Super Deck cedar, red cedar, natural cedar, I believe it is. It's the same stuff that we put on the posts and the shutters, and we're going to make it so it all matches. So now I've got some places to put my food and drink when I'm out here on the deck. So remember, as always, using things you might already have, doing things yourself, all of it saves you money. It also gives you a creative outlet and allows you to be free. See you in the next project.